Okay, I'm letting people in at the moment, but once I start, okay. Okay, there seem to be quite a few people. That's fine. Okay, which is fine. But what I'm going to do for the minute is I'm going to very quickly do something which I need to do. Okay. 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 What I'm going to do for the minute is this, just for my own purposes, okay, and everything else, because I mean, you know, I'm sort of volunteering to do this, but I'm going to put up a Google Doc, which you can put your name and your school on. Okay, so if you need something or anything, then I've got a record of it. Okay. Okay, so I'm putting the link in the chat at the moment. And you should be able to just put your name and your thing. Okay. Keep your cameras on if you can at the moment. Okay. Hi. Elisa.
Hi, good evening.
Hi, good evening. I'll say hi to everybody in a minute. Which Sharon is it? Hi. Debbie's still letting people in, I think, as well. Okay. Ella, okay, yes, okay. Ali Yassine, okay, yes, we're neighbors. Okay.
Hi.
Hi, Natalia. Hi. Okay, so I'll wait one more minute. Hi, Mickey.
Hi, I need to change my background.
Yes, dear, you've heard all this before, but don't worry about it.
You know, it doesn't matter if I've heard it before. Every time I hear it again, I learn something else. It makes a little bit more sense.
Okay. All right, so I'm waiting for a bit. I'll do it again. I put up a Google form so people can put their names down. I didn't put an email this time. I just put up the name and the school. Okay. Okay, because you're all on the WhatsApp group anyway. Mina, there seem to be quite a few people. Okay, and I know there's other people who are asking for things as well. Okay, Debbie Saboni, are you there still? Because I made her co-host to let me. Yeah,
Don't worry.
All right, but you can let people in if I open up in a minute.
Yeah.
Okay, dear.
All right.
You could also make me co-host if you want.
Mm-hmm. The two of you will be fighting all over it. Okay, that's it.
I promise not to fight.
Okay, Mickey's coming in. Okay, somebody else. Okay. First of all, okay, I'm going to put my camera on to a slightly different thing. Okay, Anna, there's still people coming in. Okay, I don't want to take up too much of your time because it's an evening as well. But what I'm going to do basically is I'm going to go through both slightly the presentation that Simone made at the beginning of the year when she spoke about what the requirements were. And secondly, to go through the actual Align document and show you how it connects to everything, because I know there were a lot of people confused. I see both. Mickey opened up Literature and More, and it was a great site and everything. But I see that a lot of people are asking questions and posting things, and some people don't know whether to do it by the new format, to do it by the old format. So, okay, this year we could do basically what we wanted. Okay, but from next year, we're going to have to do it by the new format. I'm unmuting. Okay. You just muted me, Mickey. That was lovely. Oh, you were Debbie.
I'm really sorry. I'm trying to mute everybody else and I clicked on you by mistake.
I know sometimes it gets crazy. Anyway, so yeah, okay, Mushy, I will record. Okay, I'm recording. Okay.
Recording in progress.
Thank you. Okay, so I think quite a few of you may know me, but my name is Debbie Goodbye. I'm still a counsellor, but I was counselling for the ministry for about 20 years, more or less. And I also taught all the previous literature courses, and I taught the curriculum courses, and I'm still teaching them. And at the moment, what I've been doing, apart from putting in the PLCs 3 or 4 sessions on how to work with the aligned document, is I also opened up a course in Kiryat Shmona, or from Kiryat Shmona, where people who'd already taken the curriculum course and wanted to work together. The idea was that we would understand how the document was and then build units, which I've got about 30 teachers, 33, 34 teachers who are doing this, and they've built one unit and then they're now building another unit, so that we'll have units to share in the future. So this is something that, and from that, I sort of, got to know the aligned document very well and started working with this. Okay, especially from the aspect of the summative assessment, which a lot of people found confusing at the beginning. Okay, so I'm going to open up my PowerPoint in a minute. Okay, I'm on it. And I'm going to share my screen. And then let's go into it. Okay. All right. So basically what I'm doing here is one of the questions that we always ask, and I'm going to ask you this very, very briefly for a minute, is why do we teach literature? And I'm asking because the focus on teaching literature is a little bit different from the perspective that Simone Duval and Eleanor have given it. So I'm going to ask you for a second, who can give me a reason why in general they feel that we teach literature, or a number of reasons? Who would like to give a reason? Sigal?
Okay, it's more sophisticated language. It's a different language.
Okay, you hit it on the nail here. For many of us, we were always teaching literature and we taught the pieces, and whether we chose the set program or anything else, what we were doing was basically always working towards what is the theme we want to imply, what do we want them to be able to do with it. We had the HOTS on our heads, how are we going to use the HOTS, and it became very technical. And yes, they did some beautiful work, and yes, we certainly relate to the themes and the ethics and everything that we want the kids to know. It's a window to the world. But the Dagesh, as Sigal said at the moment, is that literature is another way of enriching their language. So here, the focus has become on language acquisition. Okay, it's another vehicle for language acquisition. So I'm going now very quickly actually into Simone's presentation, and I'm just going to go through it very quickly. I'm going into it, and I can show you where it is if anybody doesn't remember where it is. When I go into the Bagrut and I go into literature, I get to the literature program. When I get into that, there is the presentation. And what I'll do is, why am I going very, very briefly through this for a second? Can you see it, or do I have to start sharing again? Can you see it? Debbie, yeah, okay.
No, not yet.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
Now, why am I doing it? Because as I actually go through the document, I want you to relate to some of the things that are here. Okay, so let's have a look for a second.
Wait, if you're showing us the document, then we're not seeing it.
Pardon?
Are you showing the document? We're still seeing the...
I'm going to show the document in 1 second. Okay. You're still seeing the document. You're not seeing the presentation.
We're not seeing the presentation. We're seeing the presentation.
That's what I asked, because every time you open either a Word or a PowerPoint, you have to close off and do it again. Right. Okay. Now can you see where it says?
Yeah.
All right. Now you can see a curriculum mindset. Okay. All right. Now, why am I saying this? And this basically is what I was mentioning beforehand. Now, literature is seen in terms of language acquisition. Okay, and that is focused at the beginning of the document that Simone gave us. Now, what does she want us to do? She wants us to encourage the students to listen and acquire language, to speak with the language or the ideas that they've acquired and put them into written and speaking production tasks, and to know how to read and to get the language, both receptive language and productive language. I think most of you know that, so I don't want to bore you with that at the time. Simone clarifies this as not really being a change. Okay, why not? Okay, because we're focusing on English language and we're not focusing on teaching Bagut. Okay, although the log is definitely assessed as part of the Bagut. Okay, so again, we have the receptive, which is the spoken, and I think most of you know that. A spoken we get basically by listening receptively either to somebody speaking about the literature, somebody reading the literature, somebody talking, and that's in general. I'm talking here with literature. And then when we have acquired from spoken or from videos or something, the kids then put it into a productive form, and they may be doing speaking tasks. The same applies for written. If they're reading the text, and this is one of the things here that's important, when we read the text, when we're reading Eric Cohen's or UPP's books or anything on the text. So the first thing they did was they gave us the vocabulary, then we had part 1, part 2, we had our basic understanding and everything else. So they were receptively acquiring the knowledge from the text. Then the tasks that they had to do, whether it was answering questions or preparing bridging or post-reading or summative assessment, were the productive things they had to do with it. So that's not new. Okay, now, why am I going on to this? When we talk about the literature log, you still got the same things. Okay, there's still 6 post-reading or bridging tasks. And there was a myth going around saying there's no bridging. You can do bridging, you can do a bridging task, or you can do bridging as part of the body. It is not tested anymore on the summative assessment, but it is still there. Okay, and 2 summative assessments, which is what we've been doing for the last few years. Okay, what is different here? That the rubrics that they're going to be assessed, and I'll show you the connection to the rubric if you haven't seen them. The rubrics are evaluating them on a much stricter manner, in a much stricter manner. Why? Because if the Dagesh here is on language, then they want to see basically that they are exposed more to vocabulary and they're using their vocabulary productively, that there is more of a Dagesh, let's say, on the grammar. So it's similar if it's 4 points or 5 points. 5 points is harder, but we're going towards like the rubrics from Module G. And the mechanics of writing, okay, you can see how it's done. All the rest, how it's split up, is very similar to the COBE. You've got 20 points for clarity and coherence. You've got 20 points for understanding of the literature piece, and 15 points here. And you've got 20 points for supporting evidence. Okay, so these are the things that are presented in the presentation before we get to the document. Okay, briefly, I'll go on. What is important here is this. The summative assessment, I'm going to start with the summative assessment when we go into the document. The summative assessment can be done orally or in writing, or it can be done partially orally and partially in writing. Okay, if you're doing it orally, then since we have to keep an example, then you would probably have to have it recorded. It may be group, it may be individual, but that's important to know. The questions, and we'll look at them, are according to the language can-do descriptors. There is more flexibility in the structure of the test. And even since this document has been put out, there are things that are more flexible than there were, especially in the number of questions. And we'll look at that in the next slide. And the rubric is used to grade each question. It's the same rubric for post-reading. Okay. Is that clear until now? Okay. Then briefly, let's have a look at this. We've got can-dos here. Look at these can-dos for a second, because we're going to see them in the generic questions and in the summative assessment when we go into the document. Can explain in some detail which character he or she most identified with and why, in level appropriate language. So you can see why the rubric related to the language. Can describe a personality of a character. Can point out the most important episodes and events. Okay, and so on, and can explain the significant events of connection between them. So here, in this last one, you're already seeing a bridging exercise. Okay. All right. And then basically the last thing, I don't want to go for a second. You've got this and we'll see it as well. A question for a summative assessment could be, pick a scene in which you disagreed, how the character you most identify with handled a situation or a person, and rewrite it in the way you think it should have happened. Now, if we compare the type of summative assessment questions that we have been doing up until now, when you had so many basic understanding and then so many questions which may be related to HOTS or had to offer a HOT or something like this, and then so many questions that related to the thinking skills or the bridging, look at this and you see that it's much more personalized. Okay, and that is one of the things, that's one of the changes here, and it's perhaps one of the more flexible things. Okay, how does his actions affect himself and other people in the story? Okay, that's a direct question. We could have asked that beforehand. Read 3 short extracts from the literary piece. Choose one and explain what will happen next and what are the clues in the text that explain the events. Now that again is connecting, bridging, the type of things that we did in bridging, but it's not classified as a bridging question. But it is making connections. Can you see it?
Dora, can I ask you a question, please?
Yeah.
Is this how a summative assessment should be looked?
What?
Is this how the test should look? Are these the only questions that we can ask? No basic understandings, nothing?
All right. Now, okay. These are the questions you can ask with summative assessment. That's the thing. What you can do is that within the framework of this, and we'll look at them more generally, some of the questions are graded according to the rubric. They're graded according to the points as well. But whereas we used to break it down, the basic understanding questions, you can give as an exercise during the body, during the time that you're teaching. Okay, rather than testing on them. However, when we look at the can-do generic questions, and I'll show you them if you don't know them already, when we look at them, you will see that some of the questions appear more straightforward than others. On the other hand, we're supposed to grade them more or less in the same way. Okay, so what I'm doing now, I've basically finished with the PowerPoint now, just to give you that idea. I'll just go back for 1 second and then I'm going to go to the document, okay? And then I think it will make sense, but I wanted you to be able to bridge that gap between Simone's presentation, which you did in September, to most of us, and what you need to know now, okay? So let me go on for 1 second. I'll just share again very, very quickly, just for the last slide. Okay. Okay. These basically are the documents, and I'll share this as well with you. These basically are the documents. All of these documents are on the portal. All of these particular ones, sample unit, empty template, and all this are connected to the aligned document. okay? And it doesn't matter whether it's the 3-point or the 4-point. Obviously, the 3-point is not going to be Mr. Noel, but they're all connected. But everything, all of these can-do statements, the can-do descriptors are connected directly to the document, and we'll see them. And also you can find them very, very quickly under the curriculum on the English portal. Okay, so I'm going out of this and I'm going to stop sharing the PowerPoint, and I'm then going to go to the aligned document. Okay. Okay. Okay, I'm going to share my screen with you. And I'm going to where I want to go. Okay. All right. Now, this, when I started doing the courses, I did, you know, for the curriculum course and again for the others, the main questions that were coming up, what the hell do we do with the aligned literature document, and what do we do with the summative assessment, which is where I started. And that's what I was talking about now. Okay, so if I actually go into the document, I've got to open beforehand, but if I go into the document, this is the document here, and I'm going to make it a bit bigger so you can see it. And if you can have a computer and you can download it in front of you, it's fine as well. But let's have a look at it. Okay. So I'm not going to read the whole thing through. Okay, but it says here that studying literary texts in the classroom is beneficial to the students, not just for language acquisition, but many other facets of education. Okay, here it connects you to the handbooks, the pedagogy section and the requirements. They were updated this year, but these things, they have not been put inside them. Okay, so it's worth reading them and knowing where they are, and everything is there. But so what am I going to do for a second? And the very first thing I'm going to do for a second is to go into these linked tables. All right, can you see the document? I'm going to probably have to stop sharing. I have.
No, you have to share.
Okay. I'm going to share it again. Okay. This is something which is connected. Oh, stop sharing, sorry. This is something, and there's two ways of getting to it as well. Okay, I'm sharing it again, but I know that I wanted to make it bigger, which is probably why it was making. Okay, all right. Have a look for a second at the way that this document is done. When we go to the curriculum document, and I'll show you that at the moment, there is a separate list for A1, A2, A3, A4, okay, or A2, B1, B2, and C, and it goes on. Okay, when we go into this, we've got here the can-dos for reception, written reception. We've got the can-dos for written production. Okay, we've got the can-dos for mediation. Okay, in general, and we've got the can-dos, okay, that elaborate more mediation as far as characters. And why am I saying this? Because all of these ones are connected to literature. When we're talking about literature, we can use any of the can-dos, spoken reception, spoken production, everything. But when I'm assessing it and when I'm interacting with the literature, I am basically looking at mediation. Okay? So the place that I go to is the can-dos for mediation. Can you see them? Okay. Now let's have a look at the different can-dos. You've got here, can express his or her reactions to work, reporting feelings and ideas in simple language. That is at the 3-point level, okay? If I'm at the 4-point level or the 5-point level, if I've got strong 4 or 5 pointers, I look at the same thing. It's more or less the same thing. Can express his reactions to work, reporting his feelings. Okay, let's have another look at another one. Can describe a character's feelings and explain the reasons for them. Okay, or can explain in some detail which character he or she most identified with and why in level appropriate language. Okay, if I go again, can say whether she liked to work or not and explain why. It's very individual. It's different than the questions that we asked before. Can select lines or passages that she particularly likes, or can describe the emotions experienced by a character, can explain briefly the feelings and opinions that the work provoked in him. Look at all these different things. They are personal responses, but personal responses can also be questions for summative assessment or post-reading. Do you understand where I'm coming from now? Let's go on a little bit here. Okay, we've got the ones that we saw on Simone's thing. Can point out the most important episodes and events. Okay, can describe the key themes and characters. Okay, can describe the key themes and characters and involving familiar or relevant situations in 2 creative pieces. And they get a bit different. Now, I'm not saying these are the overall can-dos. These are not the generic questions. But if I were building a unit and I had to state at the top of my unit planner, what are the can-dos that I am trying to fulfill? Okay, from that table, you can choose can-dos. Now, you wouldn't choose all of those can-dos. You can choose the ones that are relevant for you. Okay, so does that make sense up until now? You saw where they are at the moment. You can also find them on the portal, and I'll show you where afterwards. Okay, all right. Now, let me go back to the document because I want to go back to the document because we've looked at the tables. And I'm going to share the document again. Okay. Can you see it? Yes. Okay. All right. So let's just briefly read it here. It says, and just from this part. Okay. This amended understanding, therefore, requires the revision of the high school literature program to be used by teachers as a guide to adapt their current Bagut literature units. B1 and B2 can-do descriptors, and we saw them, which relate to literary and creative text can be found in most of the language activities, specifically mediation. And I looked more at the mediation, and that's when we went to the table. All right, then, I'm not carrying on reading because this is the academic thing. You all know this. And I'm not going for a minute to the sample unit. What I'm doing, Natalia, I can see you're tired, is I'm going to go now to a list of generic questions. You saw those can-dos, Mina. You saw those can-dos that were the overall can-dos. They're no longer called global, they're called overview. Okay, now we're going to generic questions, which is what I ask the teachers that I'm working with to base either their summative assessment or their post-reading tasks on. So let's have a look at them.
I might have a funny question, if I may.
Yeah.
I was wondering, from the A1 to B2, it's my students' level, like what it's...
If your students' level, if your 5 pointers are at the level of the A1 and A2, or if your 4 pointers are, what are you asking?
I'm asking, like, what do the different levels mean? Let's say I have a
Okay,
week.
okay, all right. Let me explain as well.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Okay, the curriculum now is divided into global levels. Okay, the A1 level basically is the elementary level, let's say Dalit through Vav. By the time they get to Zayin, Chet, Tet, they should be A2 level. Okay, by the time they get to the end of Tet, they should already be at the level of B1 or B2. Now, our 3 pointers, and very often our 4 pointers, because our 4 pointers are very often 3 4 pointers, and we know this and push them up,
Exactly.
are actually at the level of A2, B1. Okay, and you will see if you looked at the descriptors that Simone gave, and I'll show you in a minute, Simone, the descriptors that she gave for the model thing, you can see that some of the questions or some of the kanjus that she asked there are actually A2. Okay, it doesn't matter if it relates to this because you'll be going to assess them according to the rubrics. So if they can answer the question, it helps. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so let me go back for a second to where I was. Okay, I think I was on the generic questions. Let me find them for a minute. Yeah. Is it going to open? There we are. Okay, I'm gonna share, and you should be able to see it. I've made it bigger. Okay, and I'll make it even bigger again. Okay, I'm gonna share. If you remember again, I said in that document, the generic questions are linked. So that's where I went from. Okay, I didn't have to search for them. I didn't have to search for them on the English portal. They're there, but they're connected to the document. So again, I'm going into that.
Are you sharing anything? Because I can't see anything.
I'm not sharing yet. I'm sharing now. Okay, can you see? Mickey, thumbs up. Okay, good. Okay, now let's have a look again. Do you remember that kanju that I read out? Okay, Sigal, can you read it out, please?
Please. Can express his or her reactions to a work, reporting his or her feelings and ideas in level appropriate language, adapted cipher A2.
Okay, now if you remember, when we looked at that table, it also appeared very often in the 4 point and sometimes in the 5 point as well. Okay, all right, so let's have a look at the different questions that you can choose. And what are they alluding to at this time? Vocabulary band 1 and band 2. Okay, you can also demand that they use band 3 questions, okay? Band 3 language, but very often our kids are more at B2, band 2 level. So what have you got here? Pick one character and explain why you would not like to have them as a friend. We saw that one. Describe and explain why you would or would not have liked to have lived in the time or place of the story. So what am I relating to in that question? They need to understand the setting. Okay, so I will have to have taught the setting, but I can enable them on my summative assessment, rather than a basic understanding question, what is the setting? I can enable them to relate to that. Okay?
Debbie, can I make a comment?
Yes, with pleasure.
Interestingly enough, my students found it a bit confusing with the would and would not. So I agree.
Okay, well, I didn't
So
write
I took that out and I just gave them, like, explain why you would like to have him or her as a friend.
Okay, that's fine also. There's not a problem with that, but it's the same. I'm taking the kanjus the way that the questions that the way they've been applied to the kanjus. Okay, these are examples. Okay, or write how you would feel if you were a main character's family member. Okay. Describe your favorite piece of the literature, a favorite part of the literary piece. Now, obviously, these questions are a little bit that They're a little bit easier to understand, okay? And they can be answered individually. Now, what happens here? If I am giving these questions, I need to choose from these questions basically 6 questions. I need to choose 3 can-dos, okay? And for a 5-pointer, basically, it's recommended. I know it's extended, but for a 5-pointer, I would choose 3 can-dos that obviously I base my unit on, because I'm not going to test on something that I haven't based my unit on. But if I build my summative assessment at the beginning, then I'm working through backward design to more or less build my unit so that it reaches it. Or I'm adapting ECB or UPP's units so that they reach it. Do you understand where I'm coming from? So here you've got this one. Then you've got another one, and it's still A2 level. Okay, and you can look at that document afterwards and see. And then I can go up, and this is A2 level. Okay, and I get to the B1 level. Okay. For example, can point out important episodes and events in a clearly structured narrative using the appropriate language. This is the most difficult thing to understand. The questions are much easier. Okay, you have to do a BA and to be able to do that. The kids can't understand that. Okay. From the extract you chose, explain what will happen next and what were the clues in the text. Okay, it's a combination of a prediction, but it's also a bit of a bridging question. It's a making connections question.
Excuse me, Laura, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Most of the questions here relate to stories. Do you have any examples for poems?
Rega. Most of the questions here relate to
Stories.
To tone. No, there's varied ones. There's all different ones here. And that's what I want you to look at. I want you to get to know this document. Okay. If you've got the aligned document in front of you, or if you have it, even if you put it on your phone or something, you will see that you can click on it and get into it. Another thing is when you download the aligned document, download it as a PDF, because if you download it as Word, it doesn't always, the links don't always work. Okay. All right. Then you've got these, can describe the key themes. You look at the different choice you've got here. Okay. Who tells the story? Is this the best person to tell it? Why? I mean, just like when we were doing I Too Sing America, or as I grew older, who is the speaker? Okay. That Yarden could be a basic understanding question. Okay. But the why brings it up to a higher level. Okay. How would the story be different if told through another character's eyes? Compare and contrast, but we're not testing them, saying what are you using, why are you using it, and everything else. But if you've taught, and this directs the way that I'm going to teach, because when I teach, when I put the questions in the body, when I work through my body, I need to teach them compare and contrast so that they'll be able to answer this. Okay, and the same if I chose it as a post-reading. Do you see why it can be used that way? It's summative, but it can also be formative. Okay, why do you think the author wrote this story? It could be an oral question. Okay, what is the conflict? How do you think it will be solved? Problem solving. Okay, do you see where I'm coming from? And the 5 points goes through similar ways, but it's a bit more complex. Read the 3 short extracts, choose one, and explain why it is interesting, confusing, important, enjoyable passage, and explain why you chose it. Okay? Or, let's have another one. Choose, can explain in some detail which character you identified with. Again, B1, we've gone to that. So we've got B1 here at 5-point level. Okay, write about what would happen if you brought the character you most identified to school or home for a day. Pick a scene in which you disagreed, how the character you most identify with handles a situation or a person and rewrite it in the way you think it should have happened. You can also relate to a poem, The Road Not Taken or something in that. Okay. Again, can relate events in a story, film, or play to similar events he's had or heard. We always suggest using videos or something or relating it to a theme. Okay, here, these are great for post-reading, but they can also be for summative, and they can also be part of the unit. Okay, compare a character to the piece from a character from a piece that you like, a song, whatever. We do these things. What I'm saying here, and I'm stopping for a second, what I'm saying is that by getting to know this document now, it gives you a lot more freedom of choice of how you want to work with the students. It takes us out of this set way that we've been doing for so many years. Okay? Any questions until now?
Yes, I in the old essay, we had to have 20 points worth of basic understanding. And I see that there are questions in basic understanding.
Yeah.
But does that breakdown still exist? 20 points basic understanding questions, 40 for 64 or some for
okay, but the thing
analysis questions,
but it's
and then
not divided.
bridging.
Yeah, but Elisa, it's not divided
It's not
in the
divided.
same way. We used to have 40% for this and 60%
Right.
for this.
Right.
Now what it is that basically they've got, if it's a 5-pointer, basically they talked about having 3 hots, 3 can-dos, and 6 questions. And there was a 30, and a 35. Okay. And what you can do, and we'll look at an example from Simone's example in a minute. I'll show you some examples of the teachers I've worked with. What you can do with that is you can choose the questions that maybe that if it's a basic understanding question, then you're going to give it a 30, and if it's a more complex question, then you're going to give it a 35. Now, what came up, and it came up once when I went into one of Barry's things that she was giving on a coffee evening, and Simone was talking, and the questions came up. What happens if, you know, your kids are weaker and everything else? What do I do? Have I still got to do this? Have they got to write essays and this big screen coming up? Well, they can't write essays. They can't write long answers. They can't do this. There's 2 things that come up here. First of all, if you take any of those questions and if you look at the rubric, and if they have related to the different parts of the questions, even in one small paragraph, okay, one short paragraph, it's not how much they write, it's whether they've related to the things that you have asked them. And that's as far as the content is concerned. As far as the language, okay, you're going to assess it on language. Obviously, if it's a slightly shorter answer, then they're not going to have so much extended language. But if you're working at the 4-point level, and you've got the rubrics for the 4-point and for the 5-point, if you're working at the 4-point level, then you don't need them to write masses of things. They need to show that they've understood and they can express themselves. Okay, so nobody's going to go overboard. And if it's going to come back and saying, why haven't you done this or something like that? Okay, yes, Sigal.
We don't have to give them like 50 words limit or 80 words limit, just
no, you don't.
Main point.
That's exactly, the main points, exactly, because in the beginning, this is it, this came up and said, what do we do? Do we write like a G, 140 words, or do we write what, 90 words or whatever? No, you don't have to. You have to relate to the content and the style. Mickey, you agree with me? Okay. All right. Okay, so this is basically where we are as far as these are concerned. What happens with the 4 points, and this came up in this discussion that came up on Barry's thing, was that how many questions do we give the 4 points? Do we have to give them just 6 questions, or can we give them more? if the students are weaker, or even if they're weaker 5-pointers and you find that they're not going to be able to do it, so give them more questions. So you know that you've got to be able to divide it into that. So maybe those 30 marks can be divided into 2 questions. Okay. Do you see what I mean? Make it, but you've got, looking just by going through those generic questions, it really helps you build, which is why both in the PLCs I was giving and in this advanced curriculum course or whatever, this is what I suggested. Start by thinking what you want to do, build the type of questions you want to test on, and then work backwards. Okay?
Laura, I would like to ask a question about the points that you said to give for each question. What do you mean by 30 points for a question?
Sorry, you're not that clear, and maybe it's my hearing as well.
What do you mean? Do you hear me now? What do you mean by 30 points for a question?
All right, I'll explain. I'm going back to that in a second, okay? For when it came out and on Simone's PowerPoint and everything else at the very beginning, she classified as having 6 questions, okay, 3 can-dos. The 6 questions need to make up 100, okay, if you're looking at the rubric, okay? How are they divided? I needed to have 2 35 questions, 70, and 1 30 question, okay? So that, okay, now, let's go. I'm going back to the document because I think it will make sense if you see how she's developed it for Mr. Knoll, and then I can show you what people have done. Okay, so.
Debbie, can I ask a question?
With pleasure.
You're talking about the number of the questions and the division of the grades, right?
Yeah.
But as I know, like you can add more question for the 5-pointers or the 4, or maybe the 4-pointers, and this is not a must that you divide the question according to 30, 35, and 30. This is only a suggestion. And here is the
only a suggestion, exactly.
Yeah,
it's better to
talk about the summative assessment. As for the 4 points, we all know that our 4-point students are very weak. Most of them are 3+. So one suggestion was to give them more question and less point.
Yeah.
So when they
yeah, go on, Ella. You're also a counselor.
So when they will not lose too much points as for the 5 points. Even for the 5 points, if you have a student that he is really excellent or a native speaker students, you can give them 1 question and you can give them 100 on this question.
That's another thing. Okay.
This is not a must for all classes, for all students. Here is the flexibility in the aligned literature, as I know. Is it right?
Yeah, Ala, I want to relate to 2 things here. Again, when it came out and on the document that you said and everything else, and on that, it came out that this was the framework that you had your 6 questions and you built for each can-do. There was a choice of 2 questions or something like this. Now, it's true. If you've got strong 5-pointers and you feel that you give them 3 questions sachakol, but they are extended answers, okay, then there is no problem in giving them less questions. Simone has no problem with that, okay? But for the sake at the moment, if you're just starting with it, and this was what I suggested when the teachers who were in my courses built the summative assessment in the beginning, I said, okay, let's model it on the one that we've been given. Okay, Ala, do you understand where I'm coming from? Okay, and then we can try it out. Even if you made a model summative assessment and you gave it before you were giving a real summative assessment to see how your students handled that type of question. And then you modified the question and changed it. I'm not saying because it's still a test, but that way for yourself, you get an idea of how the kids are going to be able to answer questions like that. Do you see where I'm coming from? Now, if They are very, very strong students, and they can answer just 2 questions really, really well. That's also acceptable. Okay, Ella?
Yes.
Okay, that's where I'm coming from. There's a lot at the moment. It's not experimentary, but there haven't been definite clear guidelines of, is this totally acceptable or not? Mickey?
I think the idea is it's giving us some power to really adapt to what we think our students need.
Exactly.
If they're at a good level and they're capable, make them work and make them analyze. If they're weaker students, like someone who mentioned our 4-pointers, which my 4-pointers are 3-, then I'm going to give them a lot of little questions just so they can get a better grade and that are not as complex.
The can do is our definition here. Okay, go on, Mickey.
But the whole idea is that it's up to us. We know our students the best. And I think that's the main point here. That
I think so, provided that they are graded in a way that's not, if you're using the thing, but as we build our units, and that's why I'm building my units after I've done the summative assessment, I then may modify my summative assessment. Okay, but it helps me think backwards. Okay, Ella, you agree?
So sorry, Debbie, I wasn't here.
I said designing the summative assessment, even if after you slightly modify it, helps you plan backwards when you want to actually build the unit. Okay? Rather than at the beginning building the whole unit and then thinking, how am I going to test it? Okay? And that's why the can-dos are important. Okay, and I found that really helped the teachers. Okay, so let me go.
Dora, do you have an example to a sample test to show how a test should look? Maybe on a simple poem like Count the Day Lost or anything?
Not at the moment, because Terry, what's happened, I haven't got an example data for Count This Day Lost. I've got things here, but I may have by the end of the thing. I don't know how, it depends how many other people are doing it, but you can try out the things. You can also look, if you were teaching Count This Day Lost and you were using question format, you can look at those can-dos and you can say to them yourself, hang on a second, if I modify that question, if I change it around a little bit, okay, does it lead me to that can-do? Okay. That's what I'm saying. I don't think I basically, why did I start this whole thing here? Because teachers are crying out, just like you were, okay? And that's how I went through it. And I think the teachers I've been working with, it's really helped them. Okay, so let me go back to the document for a second.
I have to say that you made a lot of things a lot clearer, because just reading the document, you get lost.
Yeah. Exactly. If you go back into the document again, can you see the document in front of you? We looked at the generic questions. We looked at the rubrics, but we looked at them in a different way on Simone's PowerPoint. Let me go down here. And I want you to go to the model summative assessment. Okay? Because I'm opening this up, I'm going to have to stop sharing again. Okay, I have everything open, but it's to find it again. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna make it bigger. Okay, have a look at the instructions here. And this is the model. This is what came out in October and revised in November. Okay, Mickey, can you read it out, Mommy? Can you see it?
Yes, from the beginning, yes. Written production, summative assessment. Teachers can choose to assess the students orally or in writing. The following is a suggested sample of a summative assessment for the story Mr. Noel. Questions are according to the language can-do descriptors chosen for the teaching of the piece.
Stop. Okay, again, I say these descriptors are all the ones that were under mediation. Okay, sometimes you might need to find another one, okay? But basically they're mediation. Carry on, Mickey.
By the way, like the part with the descriptors chosen for the teaching of the piece, not just the summative assessment.
Yes, exactly. But when I choose these generic things and when I choose my descriptors, when I plan, I think about what am I going to do for a spoken production or a spoken reception task in order to be able to achieve this. Okay, go on, Mickey.
The students can be given all of the questions and can choose the two they would like to answer, or the teacher can give 2 questions for each can-do descriptor to answer.
Okay, so you see,
I love the option of choice.
That is the choice, okay? Now, even when I was doing post-reading, I even made a choice board, okay? Which even gave them more choice, but that was the thing. But this is summative assessment. Okay, go on.
Teachers can also decide on the allocation of points for each question. Someone asked that already. The teachers must use the rubric to grade each question. It is recommended to go through the rubric with the students before the test.
Okay, you may well need to adapt it to a checklist because it's too complex for them. Okay, but you've got the same idea. So look again. Let's have a look at these questions. This one can describe the personality of a character in level appropriate language. Now, she doesn't state here if it's A1 or B1 or B2. Okay, so if we looked on our chart, we would find it as A2 or B1 probably. Okay, but can you see it? Okay, all right, Debbie Saboni, can you read the first one, Mummy? Describe how. Can you see it?
Yeah, describe how Mr. Kalada acts at the end of the story and explain why you think he acts that way. You want me to read everything or?
Continue.
Oh.
How does
Mr. Kalada's actions affect himself or other people in the story? Explain why you think Mr. Kalada does not have friends. Explain Mr. Kalada's behavior pattern throughout the story. Does it change at the end of the story? Explain why or why not.
Okay, now once again, these are example questions. They are related, all of them relate to the personality of the character. That's our can do. Okay, and they would need to choose either 2 questions or even 1 question. If I was making a test, I wouldn't give them a choice of 4. I'd give them a choice of 2. Okay, because otherwise they get very confused. Okay, but that's something that you can do. Now, and if it's a 4-point, I may not even give them a choice because they may get confused just with the choice. Okay, but have a look at these questions. You've got your HOTS in them. You've got explaining patterns. Nachon. You've got the personalized thing. Explain why you think he does not have friends. So obviously, you've got to support something from the story. Okay, but do they make sense?
They're basically the same analysis and interpretation questions we asked.
Yes, but they all relate to the personality of this. Yes, they haven't changed. I agree. Okay. Oh, let's go to the next one. Anna, can you read out the green one? Can point out
the most important episodes and events in a clearly structured narrative using level appropriate productive language, vocabulary, and grammar, and explain the significance of events and the connection between them, adapted from CFR B1.
Okay, now, for example, here it says in level appropriate productive language, vocabulary, and grammar. Now, when I'm teaching, and when I'm teaching a piece or something, when I was working with the books beforehand or working with my own units, very often, what did I focus on? I focused on the specific vocabulary that they needed, either high frequency or low frequency words to understand the poem. So what did I teach them? I taught them those words. Okay. What am I being asked to do? In order to be able to do these tasks, I've got to think outside the box. I've got to think, what is the language that they need? When we were teaching them to answer HOTS question, we taught them the connectors, okay? When we were teaching them to develop an essay, whether it's for C or for G, okay? We're giving them paragraph structure, all different things to do, okay? Main idea, supporting idea, and everything else. All of these things we can put into our teaching, either in the pre-reading or in the body. That is part of our leading up to them being able to do the task. So we have to think about what is the relevant grammar and what is the relevant vocabulary, and that comes into curriculum planning, okay? Okay, then you've got the question that we already saw, read the 3 short extracts. You've got what might have happened to the character just before or just after the section you've read, okay? So you can think in context of Mr. Noel, okay? Is the setting important to the story? Again, we're relating to the boat, okay? What is the turning point of the story? Look, you've got here your literary elements, the setting, the turning point, the climax. They're all there. Okay, so again, if I've chosen what I'm going to more or less test on or assess on, I'm also planning what I'm going to do or what I'm going to teach. And that's my backward design. Okay? Can explain in some detail which character I identified with. Again, and there'll all be one here, and this is for Mr. Noel. Okay? Choose the character you identified with, write about what would happen. Again, we've seen these questions. Pick a scene in which you disagreed, how I identify. What quality of the character strikes you as a good characteristic to develop within yourself? Okay, again, it can be summative assessment, or they certainly could be post-reading. Do you see where I'm going? This is the example that Simone gave for Mr. Noel. Okay, now for the last but not least thing, I'm going to go back to this. I'm going to stop sharing again so that I can also find it. Okay, and I'm going to go back to the document that I want. Okay.
Yarden, did you have a question?
Pardon?
Yarden, I think, had a question.
Those are the 5, but the only example we've got is the 5.1. The only official example we've got is the 5. And we've also got a 3.1. There's the aligned document for the 3 point. And that's based on Mama and bank account. But if you look at the level, Yarden, if you look to the level of those questions there, okay, and there will be B1 is 4-point level. If you went even back to the A2 can-do descriptors, they're still going to fit in. Okay, can you see where I'm going? Mm-hmm. And that's what it is leading me to my unit. Okay, Ella, do you agree? Ella, you see?
Well, you explained things are getting clearer now.
Okay. Let me just go back to the main document again. Okay, so I still want to go to this, and I'm going to share my screen again. Okay, and what have we done? We've looked at the moment. We've looked at the can-dos. We've looked at the summative assessment. Okay, we've looked at the generic questions. I'm now going to go to my sample unit. Okay, so you see where I'm taking it from? It's all a sample. Okay, now this isn't the complete unit planner, which if you're asked to do that has to have your can-dos at the top and everything else. But I'm going to make it bigger, and let's go through and think of those questions.
You have to share again.
I've got to share again. Okay. Yeah, I usually say to people, scream. Okay, here we are. I'm making it bigger again. Okay, overall overview for unit or topic. Okay, how is it built? The introduction, the body, and the concluding task. Okay, I want you to look first of all at the concluding task. Okay. Can you see it says spoken production? She's summarized it here. But identify with the character. Do you remember the question's a generic question? You can guide it with that. Okay. Identify with a character who you liked. Explain why. It's a spoken production question. Written production, rewrite the dinner from your perspective. Okay, that is just an example. Now, what are we being asked to do? They have to give both a spoken production and a written production task. Okay, that is a difference also. Why? Because the Dagesh is involving speaking. We're also assessing speaking. Okay, it could be a role play. You could get them to do a group task and assess them on that as well. Do you understand where I'm coming from? Okay, so that is why did I go to that? Because these specifically identify with the questions that we were looking at. Now let's have a look here. How is Simone introducing? She's introducing it through a spoken reception clip that relates to Mr. Know-It-All. It's a fun clip. Okay. Pair work, frontal, songs with words, cartoons, and how is she assessing it? Formative. Okay. Body, vocabulary from the story. Now you can also use vocabulary here because why? The themes are stereotypes, racism, prejudice. They're going to need that in order to understand the cartoons. So I'm enriching their vocabulary while I'm teaching the theme. But I'm not yet reading the story. It's no vocabulary from the story. But it is vocabulary if I want them to be able to relate to the theme, which maybe I'm going to ask them to do in my spoken production or written production task, or later on, or in my summative assessment. Vocabulary from the story. Again, here, we've got so much of these, and we're using the ones that we've taught up to now. We've got the books with them. In the group that I'm doing now, I asked them to choose pieces from the approved list for their second piece. Why? So that we get other pieces that we are not regurgitating year after year. Okay? But at the moment, you're adapting. Read the story. Screencast-O-Matic, or you can find the story online. Basic understanding questions here. I'm coming back to you, Sigal. Basic understanding questions. Where are they there? It could be a Google form. I'll show you the examples afterwards. Critical thinking questions for understanding purposes. Okay. What are these critical thinking? They're distinguishing different perspectives. Lama, because here I'm relating to perspectives also. Okay. And in my summative assessment, I might have related to perspectives. Literary terms, setting, point of view, close reading the text, I'm building my unit. Background, bridging information. I could do that here. I could also put it here. Okay, in the same way as we planned beforehand. Okay, so again, it relates to the geography. Now let's go on. What has she got? Spoken reception. Spoken, listening to an audio, media, and recordings. I can understand extended speech. Now, this isn't from mediation. This is from one of the can-dos, okay, that I need for spoken reception. And where do I find them? I find them on the curriculum document, okay? But I can choose any one here. Can understand the content of a wide range of audio material. Okay, okay. Okay, this is how she's done it. And you can look at these yourself. Talk about it. Okay, talk about the song. In pairs, do the following tasks. Read the lyrics. Underline the words which explain what a know-all is. What do you think is a know-all? Hala vahala. Okay, written reception. Again, I'm not, okay, these are written reception. Can read level appropriate texts with the level of this, it's still reception. Why is it reception? Because I'm still getting the language. I'm getting the content from something that I'm reading. Okay. Again, reading is a leisure activity. This is mediation. Okay, it's one of the mediation can-dos. Mediation, can you see it? They're here. Look at the tasks. I'm going through them very quickly because you can go back over this yourself. Describe the cartoon. Pre-reading for the basic understanding. Who are the main characters? Who are the protagonists? The same questions we've been asking the whole time. The story is told from the first person point of view or from the perspective of the narrator. It should be, is a story told, okay? Explain, a character within the story explains their own experiences. What are the narrator's point of view, feelings or point of view about Mr. Collada? Very similar to the questions that we saw. Okay, do you see where I'm going? And that's why I started by looking at my generic can-dos and my other can-dos. And I think I've probably bored you silly. But can you see the whole thing here? I'm going to stop. But I think when you look at the aligned document and you relate it back via the can-dos, via the generic questions, via the examples, it'll make more sense to you. Okay? I don't know if it helped, but did it? Okay?
Very much.
It's getting your teeth around it, and it isn't completely different. I think it's more user-friendly once you get used to doing it. Okay? I can show you. I think I've got one open here. Just a sec. Hilal's coming in.
For a question, does the concluding task replace the post-reading?
Pardon for a sec. What were you saying? What?
Does the concluding task replace the post-reading?
Yes, it refers to post-reading. It could also be,
Bridging.
okay, it could also be a bridging if you wanted it to be. Okay, there's no reason why not. Okay, but you need to do 2 tasks, okay? Now, there's a bit of a question also. Do you have to do summative assessment as well as a summative task? If it's for the lower level, the 3 pointers, you don't have to. Okay, you can give them a summative task instead. Okay, if it's for the 4 pointers, seeing as what you have to do still at the moment, if you're being asked by an inspector, if you're being asked to show 2 examples of summative assessments, you're going to need to do summative assessments anyway. Okay, but you could make it just 2 questions, which are very developed, and it's almost like a post-reading task. Okay, I think that makes sense here. What I want to show you is one of the units that have been built, and in my opinion, she chose far too many can-dos. But this is one of the examples that was built. Let me see where I put it for a second. Yeah. Okay, and I'm now going to share my screen. Okay, now, if you look, the general backward design, and those of you who did a curriculum course beforehand, you always had this type of thing. You had to say, what was your theme? Debbie, you remember we did it. What is the theme of the literary unit? The overall can-do statements. Now here, in my opinion, she wrote down too many because I don't need the reception and everything here. I would just go for the mediation here. Okay, but if you're really breaking it down in general, you can see that for every activity that you've done, and you saw that on Simone's thing as well, there is a can-do. Okay, so here you've got this, and she's divided it into global and then operative. And then it asks how many lessons will you plan in order to achieve objectives? And they were on the unit planners that we were given all the time, also for curriculum. Then by the end of the unit, how the student's going to be tested on Simone's thing, we saw for formative, summative, whatever. Okay, here you can see the development of how they're going to be tested. Okay, and they're similar, they're the questions that were taken out. Then you go on and you've got your can-do related vocabulary, productive, recycled, receptive, hala, 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 and this all goes with the formal thing. Now let's have a look at the overview, and this is what we saw that Simone gave. Okay, as I grew older, introduction, oral discussion with use of a clip. Here's the clip, the materials. Listening to audio media recordings, the questions, what are your dreams, etc. You don't have to put all the questions in here, but she has done it. There's a worksheet attached afterwards. Okay, then vocabulary, body, looking up the words in the dictionary, highlighting them, lots of questions, circle the words, looking for time frames, hala, hala, hala. Okay, critical thinking skills, explicit teaching, explaining patterns. How are we doing it with pictures, words, comprehension, questions? How's it being assessed summatively? Okay, short, the bridging, short autobiography and quote about his poetry, background information about the poet, how did it influence his writing? Closure, spoken production describing a personal experience, writing a composition on a given topic. Okay, now and you can see these are very similar things. These were taken from the things that we were doing in the past. Do you remember, Sigal? We've got your pre-reading activity. This is no different, but it fits in. Okay, she's taken this out of UPP's book. Okay, here, it doesn't matter, but it fits in. Okay, this is all taken out of this, but she mapped it onto the thing. What is important here, and I'll scale down very, very quickly if I can. Can't get there. Okay. Okay, written production, here we are. Here's your task. Post-reading activities, look. Spoken production, here spoken production. Okay, describe a difficulty you've overcome in your life. Use the vocabulary you've learned in the unit and metaphors from the poem. Find information about other the poets of the Harlem Renaissance. They are taken from the thing, but it still relates to spoken production. Okay, written production. Okay, again, the can-dos are there. Read the following information, write a passage, evaluate the information and arguments, hala hala. Okay, use I have a dream, and she's compared it, nothing that we haven't done before. Write a composition starting with the phrase, as I grew older, can also be. It still relates to the can-do statement, summative assessments. Okay, now this summative assessment doesn't exactly go with the way it is because it was an old one, and that was my criticism for it. Okay, but it does relate to the whole thing. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing now. Okay, and there's a lot, I've got lots of other examples that have been done as well. Okay, but I think it makes sense. Okay, so I hope I've helped people. What is important here is if you go to the portal, okay, and I'll go very quickly back to the portal. If you go to the portal, I'm sharing it, and you go into here, first of all, you've got the same here, you've got the explanation of the aligned document for the 3 points. Same, it's built in the same way, okay? So you found that on that. You also, if I go back to that again, and I can't see, I've got too many bloody things open. If I go to the portal, again, if I go back to the Bagrut, and I go back to the high school for a second, I go to this, I go back to high school, and I go to English curriculum. Okay, can you see what I'm doing? And I go to the accompanying curriculum files. What have I got here? I've got the can-do statements just for A1 just for A2, just for B1, or for all levels? Okay, I've got the grammar things. I can choose what grammar things do I need? What grammar strategies do I need to do it? Do you understand? If I go into this one now for a second, can you see it? I've got the spoken reception, can-dos, okay, for the B1 level. I've got the written reception, can-dos for the B1 level. I've got the production ones. Okay, they're easier to see than on that chart that Simona's linked. Okay, and I've got the written production. And then I've got the interaction and I've got the mediation. And when I get to the mediation, you can see there's mediating a text, okay, in general, and there's mediating the literature, okay, expressing a personal response to the text, including literature. Can you see? And that's where I worked with the can-dos from, okay? So I hope I haven't bored you too much. How many questions should an essay include? If you look at it at the moment, you should have basically 6 questions that you can choose 3 from. Maybe you can have more. It needs to make up that framework. You saw the Gemishut. But if I was doing, when I asked the teachers to prepare a summative assessment, the first time I said, prepare it according to the model. Okay? You can always modify it. Okay? So I hope that I've made things a little bit clearer. You go back to the aligned document, it will make sense. And all the rest of the things are basically found on the presentations, okay?
Will you send the recording of this so that we can hear it again?
What?
The recording.
I will send the recording, okay? I don't know if I'm in, so I mean, okay. Hopefully I said the right things, but I think I have, okay?
No, it just makes it clearer when you read the document
again. It'll make it clearer, it does, for
it.
sure. I will send the recording, okay?
Thank you very much.
Okay, but I
Really
think by going through it like this, and literally to understand it, I had to go to the generic questions on that first. It really helped me work backwards. Okay. Any other questions or any other comments? Okay, I think we've got something.
It's really, really helpful.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you a lot. Thanks a lot.
Okay, yeah. Okay, I think all the questions.
You can stop the recording.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, okay, good.
Debbie, you said you wanted to point out something that we did together.
Recording
Yes,
stop.
I did. I'll show you that in a second, but you can stay on for a minute, Debbie, if you want to. Okay, I'll show you.
Oh, thank you.
Good night, everybody. This was really
good night,
wonderful.
and thank you very, very much. Okay. All right, Debs. What I'm going to show you, okay, is that we don't judge a book by its cover.
Right. Right.
I used it for twofold things. It's I'll say something different that I did. Two things. One thing is okay. I was in the Jerusalem Peace Builders along with Mickey and everything else.
I remember.
Okay, and I adapted it then. Right. I then did another course, one of these open courses, which was integrating critical thinking skills into culture. And the course itself was very complex, very interesting, but 8 hours a week, non-stop and everything else. And a lot of things. But what I did was I adapted what we did and added critical thinking skills into it to help the students demonstrate how they think and how thinking can help them. So I'll show you it. Okay.
You definitely have to send it to me because it's really interesting.
Okay, it was.
And we worked long and hard.
Exactly. No, this is it. It was interesting for that. And it's okay. I'll send it to you separately so you can see it anyway, because just to go through this document, I've got to present it to Access next week, the Access thing, and I'm going to be showing it there, but because I'm going to show how critical thinking relates to this and everything else. But
it's a pity that critical thinking isn't one of the hots that we were teaching up till now. We really sort of skirted it. We didn't really get into it.
Critical thinking is a much wider framework, and it's also what they did there, which is interesting in the course. And this is for this. We've been talking about attentive listening, okay, or active listening. Anyone who teaches diplomacy knows it as well. Active listening, we always used for speaking, and as counselors or whatever, it was part of our, or teachers in general, it was part of our thing. What they suggested here was that you adapted the active listening strategies to writing, so that as they were reading, they were actively interacting with the text with these type of questions.
Nice.
Okay.
I've actually done some of that, a little bit.
Exactly. It was interesting as well, because it's true. We do it anyway. I mean, if you think about our critical thinking, that's what we're doing as well. Anyway, I must have bored everybody. Debbie, you don't need to stay on. I'll send it to you. You can see what
it is. Send it to me. I'm very interested. And we'll be in touch. We haven't met on online for some time, Debs.
Okay. Debbie and I did together, we did this course for adapting the curriculum, adapting the curriculum to materials, or whatever, adapting materials for the curriculum. And that was it was post-basic curriculum, but it was the literature.
We were really learning the can-dos. Oh,
exactly. It was the same thing. Exactly. So it really helps us. Okay. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks to you, Debs. Bye.
Debbie, can I ask you something?
With pleasure.
I had the kishore from someone, and I got in late. Okay. I'm very interested. I'm a counselor also. I got late. I'm very interested to, to have the presentations and to, to see other Zooms you have.
Okay, well, look, first I'm going to share the link, and I'll also share the presentation.
If you have a group,
and my presentation in general. Okay, which will help. Okay.
Okay, send me the presentations.
With pleasure. Write to me directly on WhatsApp, and I'll send it there, because I don't want to put everything. There's so much going on this literature and more. Okay. But
okay.
Put your name.
I will write my email or phone number.
You can write your email, right? Okay, hang on. Okay, yeah. Wait a minute. You know what I'm going to do here? For a second, you can send to you can directly contact me from the WhatsApp. Send me a WhatsApp. Okay.
Okay.
And I'll send it via WhatsApp.
Okay. What's your phone number?
What's 0505 933 670.
670. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Debbie, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I have a question. Doesn't it mean that we have to rewrite the entire unit planner for each literary piece that we teach? Isn't it making our life much more complex?
Complex, exactly. You need to adapt it to it. Look, eventually, and this maybe could be done with your staff, it's a good idea to write your unit planners. The most important thing at the moment is to jot down. I wouldn't write that whole thing with the whole rigmarole, but the body, the part with the introduction, body, and post reading. Okay, I would jot down what you're going to use from it. If you're teaching set pieces, you already know the pieces. What you need to do is to think about how you're going to write these tests. And that's where the can-do is.
So actually we are writing the test, and then based on the questions that are going to be on the test, we're going to teach the necessary skills.
Yeah, exactly. So I would jot it down. You don't have to go into tremendous detail. Okay. At the moment, if the inspectors, I don't know, because at the moment this year I'm counseling for Rachel Tal, because I retired, and if I'm not teaching in school this year, I'm going back next year, I'm not allowed to be a counselor in the ministry, whatever. But I'm giving all the courses. I would say prepare with your staff gradually, okay? A couple of units so that you've got units with the unit planners, with the materials that you're going to use, okay? Or the materials you're going to adapt, ready, and they're there. So that if an inspector comes in or a counsellor comes in and says, I want to see examples of your unit planner, then you've got it there. Okay, but it could be a gradual process.
When we are doing an internal exam, we're not doing the log.
Yeah,
okay?
You're doing the exam.
So is it still possible, like, to test at the end of each year that we teach literature on?
Yes, but use the can-do questions to test. Okay.
Sure, but let's say if we taught all my son, Mr. Noel, the road we're taking, and summer's reading. So in the end, in the summative assessment, we'll have questions on all 3 literary pieces together.
That's all right. That's all right. If you looked also, you also had a question there. We could compare 2 pieces that you've done. Look at the questions. Look at the things. Okay. And I dare say maybe at the end of the year or the beginning of next year, something more will come out of something. I think when Simone wrote it also, she also asked, like with the rubrics also, she said she wants the feedback from the teachers. Is it okay? Is it usable? Does she need to change something? Okay, so something may come up next year as well. Okay. Any other questions?
Thank you.
All right. Okay. I hope it's helped.
Okay.
Okay. And you know where to find me if you need me. Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.